Thank you. Well, welcome to Black History Conversations, and this is a very special event. We're recognising the 85th anniversary of the presentation of the successful petition to the Governor of Jamaica by Robert Rumble and the tenants from Pennants. But we're going to start with acknowledgements and then introductions. I'm in Jamaica. I wish I was in Jamaica. I'm in Australia at the moment. And this is an acknowledgement of country. And at the beginning of every meeting here in Australia, whoever's leading, whether it's on the TV or wherever, you acknowledge the place where you are. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and the culture of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So thank you. So that's the formal acknowledgement of country from me being here in one jury country in the south of the continent of Australia in Victoria. Now this acknowledgement we've had many discussions about, and with Black History Conversations we've decided that we ought to acknowledge other issues, and we have done over 100 sessions at different times. So on this 101st sessions of the Black History Conversations, I present an apology and I acknowledge the injustice of the actions taken by the British and other European countries to invade and take possession of the lands of the Caribbean islands, as well as the continents of North and South America. In addition, I recognise with deep sadness the exploitation of Africa by European colonial powers that destabilised many of the nations and the peoples of this great continent and many other parts of the world in the centuries of colonialisation. So I think Jackie Pennants joined us, and I think, Jackie, it was your comment that encouraged us to explore ways that we could give further acknowledgements that were relevant to this particular subject that we're talking about, which is Black history. And we know that it's the International Decade for People of African Descent, so we're going to be doing some more work on that over the forthcoming seasons, and that's led by the United Nations. Okay, so just to introduce Black History Conversations, and I can see several of you are joining us now, and welcome to you all. We have actually managed to do 100 Black History Conversations. We started in 2000 in the October with Simon Feringo from Belong Nottingham and my good colleague from David Alston from Scotland. And since then, we've managed to record and post these sessions on our website, which is blackhistoryconversations.com. And I thank everybody who's been involved. It's just been a fantastic time. Now, you do have to bear in mind the fact that it's the middle of the night here, so sometimes I get a bit slow with getting these slides moved forward. So what's the focus for today? Well, the focus for today is about recognising the 85th anniversary of the presentation of the petition from the campaigning Pennants community to the Jamaican governor. The anniversary is actually on Sunday, and I hope, which is the 23rd of April, we hope that the Gleaner newspaper or the Observer is going to do something about this. So why it's of such interest is that we've been, the group in Pennants, Jamaica, and ourselves from the North Wales Jamaica Society, we linked together as the Jamaica Wales Alliance, and we've been researching into the story of Robert Rumble and the Poor Man's Improvement and Land Settlement Association. So we wanted to recognise this anniversary. But if you expect to get all the answers, in this session today, well, you're going to be disappointed because there's still an awful lot of research that needs to be done. And when you're community researchers, it's often very difficult to break through into finding the information you want, which is kept safely and securely in the academic echelons of our universities. So we'll see how we get on with that. Now, this session is supported by the Society for the Study of Labour History. So I'm really, really delighted that that we've got that support. It's excellent. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment so I can see who's here now and who's joined us. So it's really, really nice. We've introduced quite a few colleagues earlier on. Alison, it's good that you've joined us. Alison, remind us where you're joining us from, will you?
I'm in Shipley.
Lovely, great. That's great, Alison. Thanks very much indeed. And Joan, where are you joining us from?
Where's the thing? Yeah, I'm in London. I'm in London, West London, Ladbroke Grove.
London. Thank you very much indeed. And we've got Michael joining us. Do you just want to say hello, Michael?
Hello, I'm en route to I'm en route to Leicester, so I'm just going to be on sound only. I'm in the car.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. It'll be a good way to take the time through, won't it? Dominic, you're joining us from North Wales.
Oh yes, I'm joining you from the lovely Betws in North Wales, the UK.
Okay, and Dominic, you're working with the National Trust, aren't you?
Yes, so I'm a curator with the National Trust in North Wales and have responsibilities for Penryn Castle.
That's wonderful. So do join in at any time if you want further clarification or anything, because this is such an important story to share, and we hope that we'll be able to showcase this story hopefully in North Wales sometime over the summer. I'll be back next month, so that'll make life a whole lot easier. Terence, where are you joining us from?
Oh, hi everybody, I'm joining you from Hewitt Grange School in Gateshead, which is in the northeast of England. I'm the head of history here, and I'm involved in a project which is looking at Black history from a northeast England perspective. So here to listen to everything that's going on. And thanks very much. Okay.
Well, I'm sure there'll be lots of links there. Now, we introduced some of our other colleagues who are with us today. We've got Steve Cushion, who's from Labour Solidarity and lots of other activities that he's much involved in. We've got Sian from North Wales. She's doing her PhD studies into the stories of sugar and slate, and she's based in Edinburgh at the moment. We've got Michael Leroy, who's joining us he's one of the folks from the Henry George Foundation. Excuse me being informal here, but I'm just whizzing around the screen, okay? Simon Faringo, my colleague from Belong Nottingham, has set the whole session up for us. I'm very grateful. Robert Moores from the North Wales Association for Multicultural, no it isn't. Robert Moores from the
North Wales Regional Equality Network.
Equality Council, I do apologise. Jackie Pennants joining us from Florida. Excellent, thank you. Alison's joining us from up north. She was just telling us. Ivor Johnson's joining us from Pennants in Jamaica, along with Lorna Thomas. That's really wonderful. Lorna, how are you?
I am great, Liz. Thanks.
That's fantastic. So, Lorna, you're going to chip in a bit and tell us some of the stories that you know about Robert Rumble, aren't you?
Yes, I shall be doing that.
Lovely. Okay. Well, I think we may do that sort of fairly soon on, and then we can go through and look at the sort of PowerPoints and other things that I've got to tell a bit more of the story. So hang on a minute, Lorna. So I'm just looking around the screen. If I haven't said your name, I do apologise. And Sean Crichton, you're joining us, I think, from down in London, isn't it? Anyway, we're all around the world. Sean, where are you? I can't remember. And I can't hear you either, so not to worry. Sorry about that, Sean. I don't know what's happening to the sound. And Makapi Selassie is joining us from Tanzania. So we're quite a mixed bunch. And I'm joining you from Victoria in Australia, as I said earlier. Okay, then. So, and June Elizabeth White-Smith Gully, great to see you there. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited for this session.
Because this is something that you're going to be covering in your PhD studies as well. Okay, then. Right, well, while we've got the screen like this, I think it would be really lovely to introduce, first of all, our colleagues from Pennants in Jamaica. So, Lorna, would you like to introduce yourself then as Secretary of the Pennants Community Development Centre?
I greet everyone well this day, respective of whatever time it is in your location. I am Lorna Thomas, the Secretary for the Pennants Community Development Committee, shortened Pennants CDC, and also the chairperson for the Pennants Basic School. Thank you.
Okay, Lorna, you've been talking to a few people, a few locals about what memories they've got of Robert Rumble. What have you been able to find out anything else lately, or are you still work in progress?
It's still work in progress.
Okay.
What I have already had.
Now, I think your mother used to work for Robert Rumble, didn't she? Or was part of the...
They were very good friends. When he decided to go into politics, he was affiliated with the People's National Party led by the late Norman Washington Manley. She was his campaign manager when he was vying for a seat in the local government authority. But unfortunately, he was not successful. So the family is a friend of his. I can recall him as a child, very short in stature, but has a great mind, a great thinker, a person who was not afraid to challenge the authorities of society when it comes on to justice, human rights, and ill treatment in the society. In Jamaica, we would describe him as your little but your talawa.
You little but you're talawa.
Talawa, yes.
Tall and strong. So you recall him not being afraid to challenge. So as a child, would you sit quietly at the side and kind of hope you weren't noticed while you listened?
Yes. He was a person who was very, very, very attentive at the library. The library was 2 doors away from us. So he would come by our home and chatted with my mother because she also was a community champion. And they both would discuss the topical issues of the day and what they can do as community members to improve the community. So both of them were part of the Jamaica Agricultural Society. And my mother was the chairperson for the Pennants subcommittee, branch library subcommittee. So they had so much in common in volunteerism. He founded the Pennants Basic School, and my mother, years after, became the sponsor of the Pennants Basic School. So after she died, they had a problem to get somebody to volunteer to do it. And they asked me, although I was still living outside of Pennants, but I would travel to Pennants and do my part, play my part at the school. And then when it came under the Early Childhood Institute, they changed it, and only the chairperson would be a part of the executive. So the current chairperson became ill and they have asked me to step back in as chairperson.
Right, right. So very much a part of life. Robert Rumble was very much a part of life in the community of Pennants, and there are so many memories. I apologised earlier, Lorna. I'm afraid the many photographs that Clifford sent through to me over the last 2 nights, I've not been able to transfer them onto the PowerPoint, so I'm not able to show them today. But he's also been in touch with other folks who remember Robert Rumble, remember the story. Okay, well, I'm just going to go back to sharing the screen and talking about what we're on about today, and looking at the other sources of information. So Lorna, thank you so much for that information. Please chip in, correct me or anything else at any time. Now the next slide says special respect to Miss Robb. And I apologise again, Lorna, I couldn't remember Miss Robb's other name. I've only ever called her Miss Robb. She was a great local historian from the Pennants district, and it's real sadness that we have to pay respects because she was such a stalwart of the community. And we also pay respects to the other community members who have been lost recently. I know you've had quite sad times. So there she is with dub poet and historian Yasser Safari and Principal Ainsworth Williams at John Austin Primary School, and she took part in an interview before COVID, and she also is the person who gave me the document telling the history of the community, which had been produced at the library. So that goes back to your link there, Lorna, to say about the importance of the library, and the importance is that we get another library going in Pennants, because it's been sad that the previous library's been closed. Anyway, I'll talk about that now. Introducing the folks joining us today. Well, there's all of you, which is great. So we've got members of the Pennants Community Development Committee Local History Research Group. We've got Lorna, we've got Ivor. Ivor, I don't know, is your wife there?
Yeah, she at the moment she's on the outside right now, but people is here. People is here.
All right, lovely. And Clifford's there as well.
Yes.
Oh, Clifford, I'm so sorry about the photographs. I can't transfer them from my phone to my computer, so apologies there. And community researchers as well from the Jamaica Wales Alliance. So that's myself. June Elizabeth takes part in that activity with the Jamaica Wales Alliance, and others too, so thank you. We have got a Henry George Foundation representative, Michael Leroy, so that's absolutely wonderful. But apologies from Professor Anthony Bogues from Brown's University, because he's lying somewhere today. Do shout up if people appear. And can you tell me as well, shout out if you see a sign come up on your screen saying I should let somebody else in, because I'm not sure if I can manage this with the PowerPoint as well. Jose Andres Fernandez Montes de Oca from the University of Costa Rica, who's written the most magnificent PhD thesis on relevant subjects about the social unrest at this time in the Caribbean. He sent his apologies, as did Ellen Simpson at the University of Bangor Archives, which is unfortunately going to be closed between now and next September for some work to be done. And also I think we were seeing whether we could arrange for the Custos of Clarendon to join us, but apologies there, and we haven't got representatives from the University of the West Indies. So here we are then, the Pennants Local History Research Team. We meet every week, late at night for me and crack of dawn in the morning for folks in Jamaica, with Lorna, Mr. and Mrs. Ivor Johnson, and Clifford Peddy. So you can see if the picture on the left hand side is Clifford's first, then your lovely wife Ivor, and then your photograph. This photograph was taken on April Fool's Day, and I had a screen behind me pretending I was in the Caribbean. Lorna joined us as well at that meeting, and Coy Roach is the chair of the group. So that's the team from Jamaica, and we explore the histories. So that's every week. And the North Wales Jamaica Society is very active. This slide just depicts that. We do stuff about Windrush, and we support the Windrush Allies Network. June and Roland are very active in that, and the very necessary campaigns that are having to go on at the moment. And this was also where we presented welcome David Triggs from the London-based Henry George Foundation. So this is all part and parcel of it. And this is an explanation as to why we think this story is so important to us in North Wales. So Dominic will understand this. The local quarrymen working in the Pennant family slate quarries went on strike from 1900 to 1903, I think moved into 1904 possibly. At the time, the longest strike in British history. These memories of these awful years still resonate in the area. So this story, which is helping to show the resistance against those who gained so much power by enslavement of others that went on for so long and for no good reason other than creating unrealistic levels of wealth. So it is quite some story, and there is this resonance between the circumstances of the management of the quarries in North Wales and the circumstances of the management of the estates in Jamaica that both focus on the management of the Pennant family. They invested their wealth in the infrastructure in North Wales, using the skills and income gained over the centuries in Jamaica. They were in Jamaica for 400 years. But nothing but a few pennies went back into Jamaica. Now, I said thanks to the Society for the Study of Labour History, and that's really good. So Dr. Daniel Lacqua from the University of Northumbria has organised all of this. I don't know if we've got anybody from the Society for the Study of Labour History with us. Don't think so. Don't think we've got anybody else joining us. So back to this again.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you.
Sorry?
What's going on there?
And this is just to remind us that we're delighted to be joined by academics and historians, along with community researchers, as part of the Pennants Community Development Committee. And we're looking at how we can take the next steps forward, follow on with the work of the Jamaica Wales Alliance to explore our shared history. So this is an important thing for us. Because we wanted to recognise the 85th anniversary, we've put this together fairly quickly. So it isn't a case that we're sharing with you, as I've said before, all the knowledge. We're just telling you where we're at and what else we need to work on. So the Jamaica Wales Alliance, we've got our own website, jamaicawalesalliance.com. So you can look up anything there, and there's information about different activities that we're up to. We also got apologies from Ambassador Seth George Ramakan and his wife, Dr. Lola Ramakan. You can see them here in Bangor Archives with Ellen, looking at some of the fantastic maps that they've got there of the estates that they owned in Jamaica. So oops, I'm going back one, sorry. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, because they've now fitted a piece of equipment and we were able to pilot this. It's a camera that's attached to the ceiling and it looks down onto the maps, and it's able to then show them to us on Zoom, which is nothing less than remarkable. So Ivor and I spent a really lovely hour with Ellen one evening sorting out and looking at the maps, but there seemed to be a problem with the projector. I think the lens needed cleaning actually. And now the archives are closed for months on end, so it'll be a while till we get back to that again, Ivor, but that was really good. So the High Commissioner and his wife, we invited them to Wales to visit during their tour in the UK, and that was very successful, and they came to Penryn Castle as well before your time, Dominic. Apologies also, as I said earlier, from Professor Anthony Bogues. Now, this is interesting. A memorial is also about things to do. This is a memorial, this is remembering 85 years ago when these very, very brave people, challenged the Jamaican governor, the British governor of Jamaica. But what Anthony Bogue said in reference to something else is that a memorial is not only a marker that creates pause, but also makes us say, that's done. A memorial is also about things to do, recognising work done, but beckoning us forward. And I think that's really relevant because we don't know all the answers. We want to do more on this, and we also want to create a memorial in Pennants to Robert Rumble and the group of folks that he led that caused such a significant event as the sale of the plantations. Now, Professor Bogues happened to be working for a newspaper as a very young man, in his teens, I think, and he actually interviewed Robert Rumble at length. He feels that it's an excellent area for further study. He now is a very prestigious part of the team at Brown University. And as and when he has time, he's going to try and find his records. So this will be really interesting to find out. So you can see he's set up the Centre for the Study of Slavery and Justice, and is a very, very busy person. Now, okay, Clifford, I told you, I can't transfer the photographs you sent me to share today, but this photograph was one I did find. And this photograph must have been taken way back in about 2003, when we were visiting and doing some research on the history of the plantations in Jamaica. And there you are, Clifford, and there's Leonora too. And you were the first people we met when we were trying to find our way to Pennants. So I've just found that for you for a little treat to go along with the apology. Oh, so our focus today then is creating a memorial for Robert Rumble and those who campaigned with him. Now, how do we know about this anniversary? Did we find out from some in-depth academic research? No, we know we found it on Pinterest or on Instagram via Pinterest. For some unknown reason, this popped up saying that on this day, 23rd of April, 1938 in Jamaica, Robert Rumble's Poor Man's Improvement and Land Settlement Association sent a petition to the governor demanding for a minimum wage for agricultural workers and peasants and an end to the exploitation by landlords. That's two elements to the petition. Minimum wage for the agricultural workers and peasants, that's what it's called in the petition, and an end to the exploitation by landlords. In this case, the landlord was Lord Penrhyn, stating that a century after their forebears were released from slavery, this is 1938, 1838, they were still in a state of economic slavery to the landowners. So rent strikes and land occupations began, and tenants seized lands and erected fences around them. So it's pretty significant and pretty surprising that we found out about it on Pinterest, which always makes me chuckle, because whenever if you do any research, Google research on Robert Rumble comes up with this one example. But I also found this, which was a Labour Day message from the Prime Minister, Most Honourable Portia Simpson Miller. And this was May the 23rd, which is Labour Day, 2013. And Portia Simpson Miller said, I think of Robert Rumble, this part of the speech, a small farmer who'd returned from Cuba, who in 1937 formed an organisation called the Poor Man's Improvement and Land Settlement Association. In March 1938, the association boasted a membership of 800, and on April the 23rd, he addressed a petition to the governor as follows: "We are the sons of slaves who have been paying rent to landlords for fully many decades. We want better wages. We have been exploited for years." We want a minimum wage. We want freedom in this 100th year of our emancipation. We are still economic slaves. You can hear Robert Rumble's voice there, can't you, Lorna? You know, little but you tallower, not afraid to challenge.
That's
And
right.
Rumble agitated for land for the peasants and for better wages for agricultural workers. So Portia Simpson Miller thought this was important enough in 2013 to include in her speech. And she also went on to say the work of people like Robert Rumble, the Right Excellent Sir Alexander Bustamante, the Right Excellent Norman Manley, Sergeant William Grant, AGS Coombs, Rastafarian leader Leonard Howell, and Aggie Bernard, all paved the way for us today. I'm quite overwhelmed because I don't know of the stories of all those people. Obviously, I know of Bustamante and Manley, Leonard Howell, but that Robert Rumble's included by Portia Simpson Miller in this list, which shows what sort of regard she had for Robert Rumble and the work of the endeavours of the people of Pennants. Just incredible. Now, we understand that Portia Simpson Miller's not enjoying the best of health at present, so we send our best wishes from this event, and I'll see if that can be passed to her. Now, she also said in this same speech, isn't the internet wonderful? Things you can find. She didn't say that. She said, and as Robert Hart wrote in his book on labour rebellions in the 1930s, by the end of June 1938, calm had returned after island-wide protests. Now, if you don't know anything about the labour,
Richard Hart. You said Robert Hart.
Oh, sorry, Richard Hart.
Yes, people are people. Yeah.
Clifford.
Yes. Okay. No. Yes,
So,
people are people.
Yeah, if there's anybody else who doesn't know about the labour rebellions, I didn't know anything about it, it's really worth reading up, because then you see this story in context. And Portia Simpson Miller, to carry on with the rest of her information, she says that a number of factors had contributed to this. That's the labour rebellions and the fact that calm had returned. Perhaps the most important had been the launching by Bustamante of a trade union and assurances from him and the much respected barrister N.W. Manley that workers would receive proper representation. The announcement on June the 14th that a royal commission would be arriving shortly to investigate conditions had undoubtedly created expectations that improvements would be coming. So on June the 28th, Acting Governor Woolley had announced that 2 loans would be raised to finance land settlements and other infrastructural developments. So Michael Leroyd from the Henry George Foundation, this is where we need you to come in, because we need to understand if the loans helped to resolve this problem, or if in actual fact Percy Jr., who purchased the lands, whether it was his funds entirely that were used, and then he was reimbursed maybe by the British government. I'm not sure how that happened. We haven't found that out yet. The struggles of the workers had borne fruit, and the injustice that they had to yield to human dignity, and that struggle continues today. Portia Simpson Miller finished by saying we must continue to be vigilant to protect hard-won rights. Too true. Now, this covers some more of this story, so I'm just going to take a pause for a moment. Michael, were you going to add something then?
Just a quick one from me. I'm in the waiting room. Can you put me in, please?
Yes, you can put me.
Clifford, yeah.
I'm going to ask Michael first, and then you, Clifford. All right.
No, what I mean is put me online. I'm in the waiting room, so I can share. If I can share the link with Mr. Pennant actually, so that he can join the meeting.
Anyway, Pennant.
So I'm in the waiting room, waiting to be let in. So can you let me in so that I can share it with our friend Mr. Pennant?
Can you go out and come back in again, because I can't see it on my screen to let you in?
All right. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Clifford.
Okay.
Michael.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption.
No, it's all right. It's fine.
Okay.
Well, I'm afraid I can't offer any information about this. This is the first I've heard of it. We got the Henry George Foundation, of which I am a member, and I'm also a trustee. We got an email which Gavin circulated to all trustees, etc. And so I've joined the meeting out of interest, but I know nothing about it. I've heard a few words that ring a bell in my own experience. The Penryn slate quarries, because I've got a roof with Penryn quarry slates on, which were very expensive in this country still. They're about $5 each. And anyway, I'm just linking things I do understand and things I do not understand. Most of what I don't understand is the history of the Pennant relation, the Pennant family relationship with the investments. What can I call them that in colonial history? So I know nothing about that and can offer no enlightenment about that. But it's on my radar now. If I come across anything, I'll look at it with interest, because a lot of people in the slavery or the colonial times, let's put it like that, were investing, were using, were investors in these enterprises. And it's got a different character nowadays. Obviously, we don't look at it like that. Colonial history and all that is coming up for a lot of interest and a lot of criticism. I don't offer any view on that, because until I'm sure of what I believe or what I think. But it's a natural. It was an investment at that time. It's a different time. We think things differently now. I don't believe in looking back in the past too much for retribution. The past is past. I think we should start to try and get the justice in our own relationships in the 21st, or wherever we are at the moment. I think we should look forward and let the backwards be, really. But forgiveness is a great virtue. We don't understand. We think differently. How can we possibly criticize? If we were there, we might have had a different opinion, but we have our opinions now. So I'm looking into this thing. It was brought to my notice, and our council said if anyone could turn up. I've turned up. I'm a great Zoomer, if you like. I know a lot to Zoom has been a liberating influence, really. I go to lots of Zoom meetings in New York with the Henry George School of Social Justice, etc. We have Zoom meetings in the Henry George Foundation of Great Britain on Fridays, usually, where we discuss things. We're all become Zoomified, I think. And that's not meant to be a criticism. It can be quite positive in some ways, because we can reach out far wider than we did when we only met in person here in London, etc. But the Henry George Foundation of Great Britain is an honourable foundation. It's a charitable organisation. We publish The Land and Liberty, which has been going on for many, many, many years, over 100 years. I send out hard copies of that magazine when it's published, but it's also online. You can go online and download current issues, and there is an archive where all the past archive associated with Henry George, Land and Liberty, are available. You can just go on it and look. I've done that once or twice myself. I've put in the date, etc. I don't quite know how it works, but it appears to work, and it's there. It's up front, and what's been published has been published in Land and Liberty. It's an honourable name. I've just got a book actually from America. It's called Land and Liberty, blah blah blah, but it's not by the Land and Liberty people in this country. It's by a man called England, believe it or not. But it's a history of the Georgist idea of a single tax, and that's where my interest lies personally. It's the single tax, the tax that arises through economic rent of land, etc., etc., and that has obviously a national and also an international, a worldwide, perhaps a universal application when we start to colonize Mars and everything else. That there'll be still raising issues of land value tax and original arrivals, etc. So it's got a future that the mind boggles about, really. But for straight and purpose, we've got to try and get our constitutions right, get it in our tax arrangements, in our constitutions, that the economic rent of land is there for, as Henry George said, to pay for the public services of the community, etc. And that's where my perhaps narrow issue, but I believe that is the more important issue for me anyway. And I'm interested in Jamaica. I think they've got great athletes. I know a few people around here, around where I live in Peckham, who go back to Africa and speak very enthusiastically about the climate and all that, etc. So we're a mixed community where I live in London. It's E15, etc. That's only my personal story, really. And so.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. And you're quite right to say the Henry George Foundation is a very, very well respected, internationally respected organisation of the highest calibre. And the fact that in the documentation that Miss Robb had in her possession, that she gave me a copy, which was about the story of the history of Pennants. The Henry George Foundation is mentioned several times in those documents. So it's obviously a really integral part of this story.
And hopefully by drawing attention to it, members of the foundation in this country, and we're worldwide, by the way, it's not just English people or Welsh people or Scottish or Irish that are in the Henry George Foundation, but I haven't found anything in the archive yet that speaks particularly about it.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. But as you say, now it's on your radar. Any little bits will perhaps come forward. This is just to continue with something else and emphasize this sort of important time when the PMP and the JMP got established, JLP got established. So Michael Manley once remarked that Jamaica and the Caribbean were born in the midst of the dominance of European colonialization. This dominance was nurtured by the racial slavery of the plantation systems, one in which there was anti-Black racism and exploitation of the ordinary Jamaican. In such a system, no political representation was possible for ordinary Jamaicans, while Garvey's PPP was the persecutor of the efforts to politically represent the interests of Jamaican people. There were other organisations and groups that strove to challenge British colonial rule over Jamaica. In 1919, for example, there were attempts to form trade unions and efforts within an emerging middle class, like Ken Hill's National Reform Association. But in Upper Clarendon, Robert Rumble formed the Poor Man's Land Association, advocating land for small farmers. In the 1930s, the Rastafari movement emerged, and Jamaica in the 1930s, before the 1938 general strike, was a political and social cauldron. Out of this cauldron, the PMP was formed as a national movement and political party. So gosh, so many things going on. And this is just to recognise that Richard Hart was one of the people whose writing you'll find when you do any Googling into this history, a radical thinker, a historian, public intellectual, social and political historian, was in the tradition of historians that write history from the ground up, emphasising the role of those from below in making history. And this is absolutely classic, our story. And going back over again to say the 1930s was an important decade, not only for Jamaica, but the world in general. There were some important activities in rural Jamaica, which we're talking about, that attracted careful attention from Richard Hart, for example, the Robert Rumble and Peasant Organisation stories. And the important part this played in the agitation for land for the landless in the 1930s. There are even stories, and Ivor, I think you were telling me the stories about the tree people. People were literally living in trees, finding places to just...
Yes, actually we had to sleep in trees because we were disposed to, it was just a bit of land and the houses. If we could not pay the rent to the owners, we would dispossess and send out the land to them, live in hammocks in trees, to sleep there, sleep in hammocks in trees. Yeah.
Just amazing. Just while we're on that, talking with you, Ivor, have you managed, Clifford, to get yourself out in the waiting room again?
No, it keep referring me back to ID and we check the number and the numbers are right, but it keep referring me back to ID. I'm trying to delete some storage space. I don't know if that could be the hindrance.
Take all those pictures off you sent me, because it stuffed my phone up as well. Okay. Right. Off we go then. Right. Okay. Yeah. So, major works by Richard Hart, important sources to refine and rewrite history of this important decade of our history. And his works are begging for further studies by today's students of history and politics. So we'll pass that one on to you, Sean. And others. Okay, now you might not have heard of this organisation before, the Henry George Foundation, but we've just been talking about it, haven't we? This is the organisation that helped them. You can tell me though, I was fascinated by this, Michael. Is this the building in London? Because this popped up on my screen when I put in Henry George Foundation on a PowerPoint. You know, you get surprised.
Well, I don't recognise that building. We don't have a building anymore. We sold our. We had an address in my memory, which is recent in terms of years, but it was in Waterloo Bridge Road. A road in London. But that building was sold, and we rented rooms, etc. So we don't have a home, etc. anymore.
Okay, well, I've taken the picture out now. All right, so we won't pass any false.
Yeah, but
okay.
I recognise the logo, that we put that on our address, and if I send magazines out, that's on our address, and we have a post box number really now. But we're in a sort of decline, as it were, but we're still alive and kicking. The Henry. I can recommend everyone who hasn't to read the Henry George works. There's the annotated works of Henry George has recently been republished in America, and it runs to 6 volumes. So they're all not in translation, because Henry George spoke in English, so you can get and they were documented very, very reliably and honestly by the
I'm
show.
signing into my account.
Yeah, so that's fine.
Okay. So all I said here on this slide was to repeat what we've said already, but to emphasise that the correspondence between Robert Rumble and the members of the Poor Man's Improvement and Land Settlement Association and the British Parliament, the correspondence between them and the British Parliament was done through the British-based Henry George Foundation and not any colonial government agencies as might be expected. Now, this is really, really remarkable. So it really is a mystery. And
I think one must take it as a mystery, because unless we see actual documents, then
yeah.
I mean, it would be very interesting to find this. The Henry George Foundation is trying to influence politicians, etc., in the principle of land value taxation, which is what it's meant to do. But clearly, anything in the past is of historical interest. But until I see anything.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We'll search it out. So amongst the members of the foundation, apparently, according to this document that Miss Rob gave me, there were several active British parliamentarians. So I've also done some reading of Hansard, which is fascinating. You can search Hansard as well, the British government, the British Parliament papers. So clearly this challenge was taken very seriously.
Oh yes, in the night, in previous times, I think forget his surname now. Andrew McLaren was a very interested parliamentarian who was interested in Henry George's works, etc. So you look up Andrew McLaren, and the School of Economic Science was very much influenced by the works of Henry George. Nowadays it still runs, but it has a different philosophy, a wide philosophy. We're interested in economic justice, not a factional interest or anything like that. It's trying to seek out the real economic principles involved in these questions, and that must remain our. It certainly remains my interest, really. I'm not interested in any factional notions at all, or any club to join, etc. I'm interested in the economic principles of economics, really, which is what Henry George sought to discover the true meaning.
Well, thank you. So we'll just move on now. Excuse me, pushing on ahead. This article, long article by Maurice St. Pierre, is quite interesting, again, about the 1938 Jamaica disturbances, and it mentions something about the tenant strike. This is kind of jumping ahead, because later there was the report of the West India Royal Commission, the Moyne report, which I haven't had access to reading. It must be online somewhere, but I can't find it without pay barriers and things. So the Moyne report revealed that for the labouring population, mere subsistence was increasingly problematical, and the conditions were the result of the institutional barriers that sought to maintain the colonial power structure. So that's somewhere else to research. Now, where is all this information about this story? Well, a lot of it is still within the community and within Jamaica. So I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint, and I'm going to search for another PowerPoint, which there we are. We should be into this one soon. And this is exploring the story of Robert Rumble. And this is what we've found over the past goodness knows how long. Right, at this moment in time, I've lost the ability to get into Zoom, so that's not very bright, is it? What's going on here? So, don't believe this is happening. Right, let's see where we're going. Let's do something else. Oh, talk amongst yourself, peeps. This is just horrid. Every now and again, your screen just sort of sits there and refuses point blank to do anything, and mine's just doing that at the moment in time, which is just awful, and I don't know quite what to do about it. Yes, when all else fails, press escape and try again. Right, so share the screen. All right. Oh, excuse me, laughing at myself. You have to do this at this time in the morning. Right, okay, so thank you to all the many people who've been involved in telling the story of the life and times of campaigner Robert Rumble, who was born in Clarendon, Jamaica in 1896. Now, his tomb, where he's buried, is in his community in Pennants, and he was buried with national honours in 1972. So we haven't even yet managed to get the copies of the newspapers of the day, but so important was the significance of Robert Rumble's life was that the then Prime Minister was flown into Pennants by helicopter, and there are people who remember that. Lorna, I think you were telling me that you could remember that. Perhaps she does. So these slides are intended to start to explore the significance of this story in the context of moving towards better living and working conditions for the rural people descended from the enslaved Africans who'd worked in the plantations in Clarendon and Westmoreland that until 1938 had been owned by the Pennant family and other rich British families. Now, the Pennant family sold their plantations on in 1940. And this is the only known photograph of Robert Rumble. And it's interesting that it says Land and Liberty here. We don't know why that is, Michael.
Can I just raise it? Can you go back to that slide again?
Yeah.
It mentions, it gives the date there, and then it mentions Land and Liberty. It would greatly facilitate if the actual issue of Land and Liberty was mentioned, or so that can be sourced, because it should be available on our archive if it exists. So
Okay.
The date of the issue, all our Land and Liberties are, and I know because I send them out as a hard copies. I've got a number, and we've got an archive that goes back. The name of Land and Liberty changed a couple of times. It used to be called something else. So our archive goes back with a different name. But if there is a Land and Liberty issue with a number, I'm going to take that note down, 1896 and 1972, and see if that.
Those are Robert Rumble's dates, his birth and death.
And if it was
and I can't remember, it's 2 years ago since I did this, and I don't remember why I put Land and Liberty to.
Okay, so to really be precise, if one's mentioning Land and Liberty, one needs to have a proper reference, perhaps.
Absolutely. We're community researchers who do these things in the middle of the night and sometimes forget to put the references, then can't remember. So I really apologise, Michael.
I do understand.
Okay. So we discovered.
It might just be a slogan rather than the
well, this is what
title
I'm
of the
thinking.
journal.
Yeah. Wait a minute. See, it says here, Rumble enunciated a programme of a political independence for Jamaica based on the slogan Land and Liberty. Quite right.
That gives a very different aspect to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not mentioning a publication.
No, it was the slogan, Land and Liberty. But that's why I think that he knew and was in discussion, in conversation with Henry George and people of supporting Henry George, because they were just the top folks who were involved in this.
Well, Land and Liberty, I don't think had conversations directly with Henry George. I think the dates have to be. I'd have to look up my record of when the magazine was published, and whether in fact, because we do mention Land and Liberty, do mention Henry George in the magazine, but that's only in reference to articles or historical documents, etc., or his own publications. You know, he wrote extensively in person and visited these islands, England and Scotland and Ireland, etc., in person, and Australia. he was widely travelled.
There's a branch in Australia, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look at this then. So where did we get the information from? Well, Robert Rumble wrote a book, The Teachings of Robert E. Rumble.
Oh.
He told this story on tape, and it was transcribed and published in 1974 after his death. The editors were Robert A. Hill, who was born in Jamaica, and Richard Small, who was practicing law in his homeland, Jamaica. And I think it's Richard Small who's still around. So we're trying to contact him. And this is with Professor Bogues. Now, the following article is a near faithful rendition of the Jamaican dialect used by Robert Rumble as his reminiscences were taped. Now, for folks who understand that Jamaican is a language in its own right and it can't just be written as English, it means that it's really quite difficult to get the proper gist of it. And it describes Robert Rumble's education experiences as a Black peasant child in colonial Jamaica, using the terminologies that being used from the information that I was able to find at the time. So the taped interviews were first printed in issue 100, limited issue of 100 by the ISER, whatever that is, and thereafter published in a fuller edition of the autobiography of Robert Rumble by Bogle Overture publications in Britain. But it seems this never happened, because we've been onto the Bogle Overture publications. They can't find any record of it either. But I think it may be because of the problems with it really needed translating into English. Jamaican is a different language. English is another language, and you can't mix the two of them together. So you'll discover that as we start reading from the first page of the teachings of Robert E. Rumble in his own words. So my great grandmother was an African, enslaved and brought to Jamaica. Yep. My foreparents is from Jamaica. Sorry, start again. My foreparents is from Africa, a direct African. My great-grandmother is from the Guinea coast in Africa. They brought her to Jamaica as a child. What was really the condition, I couldn't tell, but I know her by face. My grandmother is her daughter, continues Robert Rumble in his own words. So then I becomes great-grandchild of her. She lives in Jamaica until she was 100 years old and she died. I fairly know her, talk to her, ask her many questions about the language. One of the most important things I generally ask her, why didn't she talk like we, the Jamaican out here? She said no, because she didn't born in Jamaica, so the language in Jamaica wasn't her language, for it's sold out then. Because the name that we really use in Jamaica and call the English language is still an African language in many cases. There's a discussion there about the language issues. So you can see that it was, and it goes on like this. It's obviously been kind of Englishized, but it hasn't been. But he talks in the first chapter, which is the only part that we've been able to get hold of. It talks just about his early life and life in Pennants and life with his family. It doesn't talk about any of the later work at all, because it's only the first chapter. Rumble travelled then to Cuba in 1920, as many others did, as a migration movement of Caribbean people who took part in the development of the sugar industry there. So he was exposed to two important influences, the penetrating Cuban nationalism and self-confidence, and the racial selfhood, patriotism and systematic organisation of Marcus Garvey. Then returning to Jamaica in 1932 at the outbreak of the labour upheavals in 1938, returning to Jamaica in 1932, I suppose that led to the upheavals in 1938. Rumble was immediately imprisoned by the colonial government. Well, I don't think that's quite right due to my understanding now, but anyway, we need to get the date sorted out. After almost a year in prison, he was released and subsequently enlisted his movement. This is the a local movement in Pennants to the ranks of Norman Manley's People's National Party. I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute because I'd like to ask Lorna. Lorna, do you remember that about the PNP link?
Yes, yes, Liz. I think it was about 1969 when he made himself available to be a candidate for the parish council seat.
And that was for the PNP?
For the PNP, yes.
Right, interesting. Okay. So I'm just catching up with what's in the chat as well. So the PNP bit, that makes sense, because part of this is kind of double checking what's known against what's written.
But
because
I am almost certain his death, the year of death is not correct. So I am going to go by the Registrar General's office in Maypen and do a search.
Okay.
And do a search on that date. I think it was later, because 1972 was when Mr. Manley won, when Michael Manley won the general elections.
Right.
And I am certain it was not that year. I think it was later on, maybe 70, beyond 75 going up.
Yeah, yeah. Right, that's really, really important.
Yes.
Joanne Crichton's written in the comments, following the Royal Commission, civil servant Frank Norman was sent to the West Indies. Norman's first major piece of work was to carry out a cost of living survey, and he became involved in developing relief schemes and land settlements. He's quite prepared to publicly criticise the elected members of the Legislative Council, and he develops schemes working with Norman's first piece of work was to carry out the cost of living survey, and became involved in, he was quite prepared to, okay, so that's good. He wrote a book, Whitehall to the West Indies, so that's very interesting. So I have a piece of paper on which I cut and paste and stick down all the comments that we need to follow up on. So thank you very much indeed. Anybody who's adding anything else in? Robert Moore says that the Moyne report can be found at the British Library. I shall be there like a shot. Robert, when I get back. I wonder how interesting that'll be. And do we know if the original tape recordings still exist, asks Dominic. The answer to that is we don't, and it's something that we can follow up now. We're getting more organised, but we really need some funding behind this because it's an expensive activity to carry out some of these research things. Right, okay, I've lost me. Where was I? I think I was in this one. Right, we got down to about here, hadn't we? About the editors. Past that one, and we're on to this one. Yes, so that was that concern. Right, so emancipation and its effects on industrial relations history. So this is just oops, a daisy, sorry. So that just this point before we go on to that was that perhaps the most significant feature of his return to Jamaica is that instead of following the normal pattern of people who have been exposed to wider world experience, who therefore tend thereafter to live in urban areas, he returned almost directly to Pennants, the same rural area in which he was born and raised. So this is an interesting point. And Robert Rumble occupies a unique position of being a political leader of the sole peasant or originated movement to emerge in the struggle for West Indian independence against British imperialism. It's a unique story. There isn't another one like it. So this is just to help you see that we have done some sensible research. read quite a few books, things that we can get hold of. Claimed 800 for the membership. Interesting point that I've spoken to somebody else about, can't remember who it was, that the British labour unions had sought to guide and encourage the formation of the West Indian affiliate. So there was good support going across from the unions. Which is nice to hear. Sorry, just go back and read the last point. Fabian tutelage and reform policies appear to have failed when the workers broke out with spontaneous demonstrations. So on the sugar plantations, there were some huge problems. Okay, the movement to refuse to pay any more rent to landlords began to spread, and in some areas, land-hungry people seized the estate lands. Now, we've not made this point before, but the concerns were fueled by the revival of a widely held belief that Queen Victoria had promised that after 100 years after emancipation, the enslaved people who got nothing at the time of the abolition of slavery would inherit the land. And that was something that was very, very much believed. And tenants or others who seized the land began to erect fences and offered to pay taxes on the lands, the ownership which they claimed to have acquired. Okay. See, this is the date that he was arrested, and it was wrong that it said on the other slide it was when he came back from Cuba, because apparently it was just after Christmas in 1938 he was arrested, which was after the petition had been put in. So he's clearly making his point here. We are the sons of slaves. Perhaps this is an unedited version. Who have been paying rent to the landlords for fully many decades. We want better wages. We've been exploited for years. We're looking to you to help us. We want a minimum wage law. That wasn't in the last quote. We want freedom in this 100th year of our imagination. We are economic slaves burdened in paying rent to landlords who are sucking out our vitalities. Right. So, the hastily dispatched Royal Commission was dominated by Fabians and chaired by Lord Moyne, toured the region, reported on dismal conditions and recommendations for significant political report, noted the causes of the riots, increased the politicisation of workers in the region, deriving from the war experiences of West Indian soldiers, because there would have been people who'd fought in the First World War. Remember, this is just before the Second World War. The spread of elementary education and the influence of industrial labour unrest in the States, United States, because there was obviously travel back and forth with workers, and after the riots, reforms sought by the union, the middle classes and the workers were formalised. So in 1940, the British Parliament passed the Colonial Development Welfare Act, the first foreign assistance programme legislated specifically for the islands. The British government also extended the franchise to all adults over the age of 21 and set about building the apparatus for modified self-government with greater local participation. If you've never read Hansard, it's really fascinating, because there can be a sitting of Parliament on a particular date and the agenda covers things like there'll be something about India and some issues they need to raise there. And then there's something about a country in Africa, or two countries in Africa. There'll be something about a country in the Caribbean, and then it'll go back to Scotland. Scotland seems to get a lot of things I've been reading, seems to get a lot of time in Parliament spent on discussing their issues. It's just mind-boggling to think that people are trying to sit in there in the House of Commons trying to manage the whole third of the world. Okay, so Socialist History Society, you've discovered, I think you put this in the chat, didn't you, Steve? Robert Hart's Labour Rebellions of the 1930s, which is a good one. and this is more about Richard Hart, sorry, Clifford. And this is a little bit more about the piece of work that Jose did for his PhD, Jamaica in the Age of Development, Petition Small Farming and Agricultural Planning. I'm not going to read all this out, but it gives more detail of the labour rebellion, the unrest started as an isolated strike in Westmoreland on the Frome estate belonging to the West Indies Sugars Company. Now, what's really interesting is that the Pennants had a plantation adjacent to the Frome estate. So one wonders what was going on there as well. So lots of more information there to share. Clash ended with 85 arrests, 14 wounded and 4 people shot dead. And the strikes carried on, and the tenants in Upper Clarendon took over properties and expelled the landlord during this island-wide rebellion. More police intervention. So we linked up, but the issues carried on as the Great Depression wore on and ceased on the eve of World War II. Each labour rebellion had its own particular circumstances, and it really was all over the Caribbean.
Liz, there's an interesting comment on one of the earlier slides about the unemployed joining the strike. Now, I mean, that clearly indicates that we're not talking about a sort of labour dispute and strike as it would be understood, say, in Britain. And I mean, I don't have any detailed knowledge of Caribbean history, but labour unions seem to me to mean different things in different places.
Well,
I mean,
it's not unknown for unemployed workers to support people in work. I mean, it's possibly more recent, but it's not unknown for people out of work and people in work to campaign on the same issue.
Oh, yeah, but you can't strike if you're unemployed.
You can't strike if you're unemployed, I grant you, but they can be there, they can be supporting it or whatever. I take your point that you can't strike if you're not employed. I get that.
But one of the issues is the extent to which unions were formed to pursue what in Britain we would think of as traditional industrial relations over wages, conditions, holidays, hours of work, and so on, or more like the unions in India, which I did some interviews with trade unions in India just after the Bhopal disaster, and try to find out about their policies on health and safety at work, which would be a traditional British concern. And they were very uninterested in those issues because the unions there seem to have been formed to promote the independence movement in India during the sort of 1930s and 40s. And I mean, they wouldn't take up health and safety issues because they were afraid that any restrictions on dangerous working conditions and so on would reduce their hours and therefore reduce their incomes. And any union that campaigned on health and safety would immediately lose members. So there's a very different scenario there in India for trade unions. They were not doing the traditional, or what we would regard in Western Europe as the traditional labor union things. And I just wonder, in Jamaica and the West Indian context, to what extent unions were just part of the movement for colonial freedom, or were they heavily involved in the day-to-day negotiations over wages and conditions?
Interesting. I think there's so much that we can talk about with this, and so much more to understand. And yeah, thank you for that. That's great. I'm just checking. Sean's said also in the chat that the colour bar attitudes were disputed over in respect of the administration of the colonies during the war on the 21st of May 1941. Lord Moyne, who was doing the report, Secretary of State for the colonies, told colonial governors, "I trust it'll be possible in future to select for appointments of executive councils persons of various sections of the community, and that no one otherwise reasonably suitable would be excluded because of social or racial reasons." And then there's another quote, and then a statement which is interesting, that the governor of the Bahamas, the then Duke of Windsor, wrote to the colonial secretary supporting the continuation of the colour bar. I'm surprised.
Well, he was a
Right.
supporter of Hitler.
There was a programme about him. We get all the old BBC programmes over here. There's a programme about him the other night. It was very
The Traitor
interesting.
King.
The Traitor King. Yes, I think that's probably what it was. Right. We get them here eventually. Right. I'm just going to just carry on whizzing through this PowerPoint that I've got, which has got some references in, and this is 1936. You know, setting this in context, 11 of the 14 parishes, this will be in Jamaica, spent more than a third of their estimated revenues on pauper relief. And in the end of 1936, there were 9,681 people on the island on outdoor relief and 2,300 in institutions. And the book by Cape Coast, Horace Starveling's The Jamaican Labour Rebellion of 1938 and its aftermath, is something that we need to get hold of and share and read. Okay, I'm just going to make this one a bit bigger so you can see it.
Okay. Excuse me, Liz.
Yes.
I am so sorry. I have to go. I was expecting a house guest and he's here.
All right. Okay, that's fine, Lorna. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for telling us about your mum, and we'll record this, and so you'll be able to listen to anything else that we do as we go along. Okay, well, that's not much longer. All right, then.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay, so Baron Napier, Baron Penrhyn, or sometimes called Lord Penrhyn, was Hugh Napier, and he sold the Pennants and Cupis estates, including Pennants Deuces, all in the parish of Clarendon, Jamaica. Now, because we can't get into the archives at the moment, and I don't know if you looked at this end time of the selling on of the estates. It'd be really interesting if you could do that when you get back into the archives in Bangor eventually. But this is an archive document, and this is the Right Honourable Hugh Napier, Baron Penrhyn, to, and this is what's really, really interesting, to Percy Junior Esquire. Now, Percy Junior is so well known in Clarendon that he's even got a hospital named after him. So he must have been quite some philanthropist. And we're in touch with his great grand nephew, the Honourable John Junior, and he's trying to see if the family have got any records or memories or anything of this. But this is the conveyance document for Pennants Cupis, including Pennants Deuces. So we need to get some more research done on this. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop sharing there. Just going to check out that PowerPoint and see if it's got anything else vitally important on it. No, that's fine. Okay, so I'm just going back to a previous document that we managed to get hold of. And if you've got an academic, the date of the sale was Dominic, was 1940. It's just dated as 1940. So this is why it's such an incredible story, because how could between June 1938 and 1940 the sale had gone through? Just unbelievable. So there was obviously somebody who was pulling strings in the background to make that happen. But that's only the sale that we know of 3 of the plantations, but as far as we know, the others were sold about the same time as well. So yeah, interesting. So I just wanted to thanks, Dominic. I see your thumb up there. just to go back to this, the teachings of Robert Rumble. Okay, so I know you can't read this because it's too small. So what I've done is I've cut it out, cut it about, just to give you, this is what it says in his book, and it confirms that this is the Land and Liberty slogan. Robert E. Rumble, born in 1896, was the founder and leader of the mid-1930s of the Poor Man's Improvement Land Settlement and Labour Association in Upper Clarendon region of Jamaica. We know the rest of this. Then Rumble enunciated a programme of political independence for Jamaica based on the slogan Land and Liberty. So he enunciated a programme of political independence for Jamaica, not just Pennants, Jamaica, based on the slogan Land and Liberty. So maybe that's where Henry George got the idea, or later people, for the Land and Liberty magazine. Who knows? At the outbreak of the labour upheavals in 1938, Rumble was immediately imprisoned by the colonial government, and after almost a year in prison, he was released and subsequently enlisted his movement in the ranks of Norman Manley's People's National Party. But just a bit about Rumble himself. He was an artisan, wheelwright, coach builder and a tailor. He travelled to Cuba in the migration movement. We've covered that before. And we're okay on the rest of that. In Cuba, we've talked about the 2 influences before. Now, this is the beginning of the book as written by the 2 colleagues. And we've covered that before, so that's all right. Now we need to learn from people who remember Robert Rumble. And so this is what Clifford started in the early days of the pandemic. Clifford and I used to talk on the phone, and Clifford used to go off and see the locals and chat with them. This is what we've already seen. These are the documents that we've got in Bangor University that we've seen, but this was a debate, a disagreement, this document. It's a different one. This is 1929, I think, 39. This document is 1933. So we have been able to get hold of a few copies. So I'm just going to stop sharing there, because that's most of the information that we've managed to glean so far about the story of Robert Rumble and the group that he set up. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Ivor or Clifford.
Not really.
I'm not hearing you very well.
Adding anything to the program? No, not really. Not really. I mean, we're pleased with what is going on. And we know that time and slowness is part of it. And as for today's program, well, I like it very much, especially the beginning, how you've put the historical events and can present it to us, the members and audience, and it's how to enlighten our darkness, and it shows how much you have done and how much it can happen, that the project can happen. And as we press on with all the parts of the project, that important people will come on board and make it all the more happen, because you're proposing writing books and furnishing libraries with information, and things like the ex-Prime Minister Portia Simpson, their injection shows that it has a potential to live on. So we in the Pennants Group here, Brother Ivor and Brother Pennant, you know, he's a gentleman in the community who's part of the team, but because of his occupation, you know, he's a shop owner. He cannot attend meetings as often as we do, but he has the name of Pennant. so he's a inheritor somewhere along the line. So we're glad that it's going on and that we can inject our part in it. And I hope that even when we're dead and gone, it can still go on, because these things normally take a long time to materialize. So
Yeah, Clifford, that's really, really kind of you what you've said, because you and I have been talking, as you saw in that photograph. I mean, that must have been 2003, and that was the first time we went to Pennants, and with Marion Gwynn, who's Dr. Marion Gwynn. She's a researcher in North Wales, and we struggled to find the Pennants Great House, and I think in the end, the house that we did find, the ruins of the house we did find, we understand now was the overseer's house. So, and it was lovely to see the photographs you sent, and the river, and you know, the places that we've seen on paintings in Penryn Castle. And the only place we've seen those records before, and there's you taking a photograph of the road that goes down to the river. It was really lovely. Thank you ever so much, Clifford. I really, really appreciate it, and appreciate all your time and effort. And as you can see, yes, I did do quite a lot of background research with what I could do as I was learning to use Google and find my way around. But I haven't got research skills that academics would have. So I've got a determination to find out the story.
Doing very well, very well.
Oh, well, thank you. And Ivor, that's a real good commendation. Right, I'm just going to rattle through the rest of the whatever, if I can find the PowerPoint back again, because we were just going to do kind of the other side of the story. So this is the Welsh side of the story. We'll just have a little look at this. The other side of the story, right? Okay, then, right. So this is the sort of bad news version. The documents that are in Bangor University are incredible. Now, this document isn't clear enough for any of us to read, but it's the list of the slaves and stock on the Pennants estates, dated 1812. And it talks about how the descendants of Gifford Pennant, who was the first one who went over in 1655, part of the Cromwell's invasion forces. His son, I think, was Edward Pennant, and then his grandsons were Samuel and Henry, and then eventually they returned to Britain in about 1760 or something. Now, somebody else who's taken a real interest in this story is Professor Catherine Hall. She's the person who was active in the establishment of the Legacies of British Slave Ownership database and all the research, wonderful research they've done at University College London. Now, there's a newsletter called the International Social History Association, and she writes an article in this, and I found it fascinating, because here we've got a picture of Penryn Castle. Okay. Let me open with this image of Penryn Castle, a massive Norman, inverted commas, construction in North Wales, the heart of Snowdonia, built in the early 19th century and now owned by the National Trust. And we have our National Trust representative here with us today, with Dominic, which is fantastic. It receives many visitors, but what stories are told about this building? Now, this was written in 2017, Dominic, so it's kind of before that good exhibition that was done. What is remembered, what's been forgotten, who built the castle, where did the money come from, how can the history's been illuminated, what kind of memory is this? Now, the Pennants project that we've been working on, we've had terrific support from Yasser Safari, the Jamaican poet. And you can see him there with Richard Douglas Pennant, who is the older of the two brothers who are the head of the family these days. And they have set up a trust called the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation, and we are trying to work with them to be able to get some recompense to be able to spend in the community to do some things. So that's one of the active things that we're doing at the moment. So more news on that one if we get any news. Sorry, that was this amazing paper that Jose did at the University of Pittsburgh, and he's now teaching at the University of Costa Rica. So his gives some detail there. Don't need that, I don't think. Now, I took this off the National Trust website just to show that the National Trust is now telling this story clearly on the website, and you can look that up. It also talks about the Great Penrhyn Quarry Strike, and it talks about Richard Pennant, who was either born on the way back from Jamaica or to Wales, or was born in Wales. He became MP for Petersfield in 1761, and 6 years later became one of the 2 MPs for Liverpool, which by this time was a major slave port, the major slave port of Britain. He became very powerful and influential in the pro-slavery network. He was an anti-abolitionist. That means he didn't want abolition. He was pro-slavery, thought it was a good idea, which is an indication as they kept the family lands for as long as possible. And they held connections with virtually all the major absentee plantation owners in Britain. So he was the first generation of the absentee plantation owners in Britain. So up until 1826, apparently strikes were illegal in the UK. But over the years, the quarrymen at Penrhyn slave quarries campaigned against their poor work conditions. But the then Lord Penrhyn, who was Edward Douglas Pennant, refused to negotiate anything. These campaigns culminated in the Great Strike of 1900 to 1903, the longest industrial dispute to ever happen in the countries of Britain. Now, there's a picture here, and they're actually the renowned Penrhyn Choir, and there still is a Penrhyn Choir till this day in Bethesda. And the flag here says, the Penrhyn Dispute, Bethesda Quarrymen's Choir, all you contribute is for the suffering women and children. Times were really, really hard. And Professor Catherine Hall in her article carries on saying that the Pennants were very hard employers. This is it, talking about Wales, and about Jamaica. In the 1890s, the quarrymen were struggling with Baron Penrhyn over skilled labour subcontracting and the demand for minimum wage. And there was a lockout for over a year in 1896. Then in 1900, Penrhyn refused to permit union dues to be collected, and this time the lockout lasted for 3 years. A third of the labour force of 4,000 men were forced to migrate to the coal mines of South Wales, and there's a monument to this struggle in a small town of Bethesda next to the quarry. So I'll have to see what monument there is there, because I can't remember seeing one. I know in all the schools there's monuments to the strike and a lot of recognition to do with it. And just on a personal note, my family had family in South Wales who we never spoke to, because the people who left were considered strike breakers and they were left to their own devices. So it's interesting. Maybe there's a personal family link there, who knows? So you can see why there is this similarity between the two places. Just to say that this Edmund Pennant, the younger of the brothers, Pennant brothers, Douglas Pennant brothers, was interviewed by the BBC along with a Jamaican heritage pennant called Diane Pennant, and they did a BBC programme which is on YouTube, but it was cut and fixed and put into a how Liverpool became the greatest slave import in human history programme, and that's really very interesting because the Pennant family had such close links with Liverpool. Now our Pennants project today, we've got the aims of what we're trying to do, both to build relationships and provide support appropriate for the 21st century, and this is what we're working with the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation on. They provide funding also to Bangor and the Ogwen Valley, and we're looking at the Jamaican links. And this started with a challenge made by the Mayor of Clarendon, Milton Brown, Councillor Milton Brown, in 2007, and continues. So we're also looking to support the development of links between school students and community members, and looking at stories, including the stories of the ancestors, including Robert Rumble. So a memorial is about things to do. Okay. Not only as a marker that creates a pause, but also makes us say that's done. So Clifford and Ivor, when we've got Robert Rumble's tomb smartened up, and we've got signage, and we've got a proper fence around it, and we've got some information there, it'll be a memorial that's also about things to do, recognising the work done, but beckoning us forward. So there's lots more work to do.
That's right.
So I'm really pleased that Robert Rumble, I found that quote for Robert Rumble, quote about Robert Rumble by Anthony Bogue. So that was really good. So that's a ramble through by PowerPoint of all the things that I've put together for years. And I just thank you so much, and just wonder if there's anything else anybody wants to add.
It's just one last night I was talking to Mr. Pennant, was trying to find out his family line. Because his father, he doesn't know much about his grandfather, but we want to start there and to dig some more. We can find out the history of that, who was his father, his grandfather, and national slavery as to who his lineage come from. So,
Yeah.
So that's interesting to do that.
That'll be fantastic, Ivor, if you can follow that through. And Clifford, as you're talking to, you know, other people in your community like Mr. Pennants, you know, just note down their stories and pass them on to us. That would be so helpful, Ivor.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
helpful.
yes.
All right. So
just a couple of comments. I've enjoyed being on this Zoom meeting. I've learned a lot. I've got a lot more to discover. We've all got a lot more to learn. But I have to leave now. But life goes on here in London as well, in a normal way. But and I'll look in, or if you can invite us again, or you've got my email address.
Yeah.
So you can let me know when the next one is, and I can see if I can return. I'm just a small voice in the Henry George Foundation here, but I'm a trustee and I'll report back at our next meeting and tell them what I've learned or not learned, or still need to learn. But the Pennant family and Jamaica, I think, is an interesting area to know about. And thank you very much. But I must leave now, because otherwise the shops will close around here.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Michael. It's really been brilliant that you're able to join us, because really at the end of the day, I think a really big thank you needs to go to the Henry George Foundation, because whatever happened, whatever they made happen, was truly significant, and it would be good to know what happened so we can say a proper thank you. But in between whiles, do share the story and see what you can find out, and we'll share with you. Thank you, Michael, so much.
God bless everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Now, Sean Cretan says there was a fundraiser for the strikers in Croydon, Battersea in 1901. So yeah, they travelled all around the country, and they were renowned, because you know what Welsh choirs are like. So that was a really nice bit of information that I'm making a note of here, Sean. Thank you very much indeed. And Robert Moore says that the Fabians had an interest in the Caribbean. Lord Jock Campbell, he sounds like a Welshman, was a leading light in the Fabians. He was chairman of Booker's, his family firm, and tried to be a reforming manager. He told me that he became a socialist as a result of his parents' attitudes to their servants in London and Ireland. He played with the children of plantation workers and learned of the working conditions on his family plantations in Demerara. So that's really interesting, Richard. Robert, you find out all kinds of information once you start talking. Right, so I'm going to make a note about that as well. Right, anybody else who wants to chirp in? Roland's put in his bit about the Justice for Unjust Generations. And the African diaspora Windrush Scheme Monday chat, Monday the 24th of April. Don't usually chat on Mondays, but it must be a new one. So he's put in the link and everything else for people. The campaigning work that's gone on to do with the inequity and challenges faced by the Windrush generation, the work that Roland and his colleagues have put in has just been absolutely fantastic, and I've been delighted to be able to support in whatever little way I can. Okay, Dominic says that the National Trust last summer, they withdrew the Penryn Guidebook, main publication for visitors, and replaced it this spring with a newly written guide that better told these complex histories. We'll continue to review this publication. And Dominic, I don't know if you're still listening, but I'm really looking forward to coming over and meeting up with folks. And I noticed that my National Trust membership had been continued, so that's good news. I'll be able to get in and see what's been going on, so that's really good. Another new message, people miss us. Yes, thank you very much. The Windrush Film Festival, you put that in again. Thank you indeed. That's wonderful, Robert. So any more queries or questions or anything else? Right, try and find the right place. Okay then, well, thank you all of you. I should have taken a photo of the screen earlier. If anybody wants to put their picture on, if you're still there, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. And it's been great to see you all. Walter's joined us now, Walter Lavelle, that's good. Good, Dominic. Any comments then about, oh, lovely, lovely, lovely to see you all there. Right, let's any more pictures coming up. Dominic, put your picture on again. I'll catch you then. Lovely. Okay then, so Dominic, any other comments then from today, and do you feel you learned anything, or were we just reinforcing what you knew already? Or
I learned so much. My knowledge of Robert Rumble is almost nothing, and if you remember, you were the first person who introduced me to this story, so I'm just lapping it up. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, I do hope that when I get over there next month, it'll be the middle of the month, I'll probably get up to Wales in beginning of June. It'll be great to maybe arrange to meet up with you and with my colleagues there. You know, we can have some joint meetings. I thought we might actually we're going to need to have somewhere where we can do the Zoom calls with the technology, so we can involve more local people. So I don't know if the castle has that technology. We'll have to see. Not it'll be the university. All right, well, I'll talk to you again about that. Thank you so much for hanging on in for all this long time. Okay, anybody else then? Am I going to hear from you, my dear, over in Pennants? How are you doing? I see you've got your mask on, Bill. You're still worried.
I came down with the flu.
Oh,
And I was very busy, but listening from where I was. I
good.
expect my sisters today. They are coming from Canada.
Oh,
So
right.
I was fixing up for them. They're coming to my uncle's funeral, which will be Monday.
I said earlier, I said, you know, I know you've had so much sadness over there. I really feel for you.
Yeah.
It's really been difficult, hasn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, look after yourselves. I see you've all got your masks on and being careful
Yes.
and cautious.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're trying to do that.
Yeah, lovely. Anybody else then for anything else before we go? Steve, anything from you? You've still managed to sit through it? Or June Elizabeth?
I just want to thank you for your effort and everybody that participated. As you know, Robert Rumble is one of my favourite people because you brought him to light, and I want to keep him a light. Yeah. So in my homework last week for my MA, I did a podcast and I managed to introduce him. It was under the history of compassion, but I squeezed him in because he knew the consequences, but he had so much care and compassion. He went to prison, but 2 years later, the Pennants estate had to be sold. So I squeeze him in, you know.
Good. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you very much, June Elizabeth, and thank you for your ongoing support. That's wonderful. And Sean, thank you for your comments in the chat, and that's helpful. Anything else you want to add, Sean? I don't know why, but I can't hear you. Never mind. Okay, all the very best anyway. All the very best to all of you. And next week's Black History Conversations, we're going to be stick with the same time, I think, so that our Jamaican friends can join us. And we will be meeting the guy from Liverpool Museum. So that will be interesting to follow that through. He's called Richard Benjamin, I think, isn't he?
Yes. Excuse me, Liz, sorry. Would you be able to just drop Victor Richards and Dr. Marcella Day just to update on the change of time so they can adjust their diaries accordingly? I think it'd be better coming from you. There won't be no mistakes.
Thank you. We have changed the times, and it may be that it will be awkward for some people, but better for other people. So as long as our friends in Jamaica can join us, that's good. Walter, I'm glad you were able to join us. Makapi Selassie, brilliant and wonderful. Joan, I'm glad you joined us. Good.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Walter Lavell's from the Rotary Group in Maypen and a great supporter of the Pennants Project. So thank you. I'm just going around my screen. Thank you, Dominic. Simon's not with us at the moment, but he put himself out to make this later time. So I appreciate that. Roland, that's really wonderful. Steve, excellent. Thank you for your contribution. And have I gone round everybody yet? I think just about. My very, very most thanks is to my colleagues in Pennants who were so patient and are so willing to get up early in the morning or whatever you need to do to support us with our efforts, and we will succeed. And I think this has been a very significant opportunity, and I can't thank you all enough. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, right.
Okay.
Now, when I switch off, then that's going to be it, because we can't do the chatting afterwards like we normally do. So, McCarthy, is there anything else you want to add?
I just want to say, as always, it's been enlightening, Liz. Well done yourself for all that work you put in, and give thanks to each and everyone who's on the Zoom. Yeah, educational and enlightening, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Selassie, Mr. Selassie, Rastra
Yes.
Balani's over. Rastra Balani's in Northampton with us. I was with
I
him
know,
yesterday.
I spoke to him when he was in Birmingham.
Where he's back in Northampton now. We're setting up some events. We've got
Okay,
a Windrush,
excellent.
we've got a Windrush reunion tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well done. Heal him up for me.
I will do, yeah. Okay,
All
one
right.
love, yeah?
Yeah, take care. All right.
Okay, anything else for anybody else? No, lovely. Okay then, well, just switch yourselves off now and then I'll switch the whole thing off. Okay,
Larry,
thanks, Dominic, thank you. Thanks, bye.
take care.
Okay, yeah,
One love,
lovely.
Jamaica. One love,
Bye,
one love.
lovely.
Bye. Yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye for now then. Okay,
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.
Catch up with you next Thursday. We'll fill in all the forms then, all right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, that was lovely. Okay then, all the very best then. Bye.
Bye.